The laughter came through the translator half a second late, which somehow made it worse. Fleet Commander Elena Reyes stood on the bridge of the Resolve and watched 11 alien delegates on the view screen laugh at her species. Not shout, not threaten. Laugh, the way you laugh at a child who says they want to be an astronaut and a king at the same time. Humanity's application for provisional Concord membership, said the lead delegate, a tall insectoid being named Chorus, requests fleet recognition equal to species who have held stable interstellar civilization for 11,000 years. You have had space travel for 140. We are not laughing at you, Commander. We are laughing for you. Someone should tell you the truth kindly. Elena kept her face still. She had learned that a long time ago, in a hospital hallway, watching machines breathe for her father because the family couldn't afford the treatment that would have let him breathe for himself. She had learned that some feelings shouldn't reach your face. It was one of the more useful things grief ever taught her. Denied, Chorus said, and closed the channel before she could answer. Beside her, Commander Marcus Webb exhaled through his nose. Well, that was efficient. They're not wrong, Elena said quietly. We're 140 years old, and we're asking to sit at a table that's been set for 11,000. Doesn't mean they get to laugh while they say no. She didn't answer that. She was already turning toward the man standing near the bridge doorway, watching the whole exchange with an expression she couldn't quite read. Tassir was Vikaran, tall, pale-skinned, with eyes set slightly too wide apart by human standards, and he had been assigned to humanity's delegation as what the Concord officially called a liaison and what everyone on the Resolve understood to mean babysitter. You didn't laugh, Elena said to him. Tassir considered that. I found it unwise. Your species has been alone for a very short time and has already built ships that reach this far. My people took 3,000 years to leave our own system. I do not think stupid things move quickly. It wasn't quite a compliment. It also wasn't nothing. Careful, Marcus muttered. That's the nicest thing a Concord official has said to us since we got here. Elena almost smiled. Almost. She'd been fighting for this fleet. Really fighting budget hearings and skeptical generals and a public that mostly wanted to know why any of this mattered when there were problems enough at home. For 6 years. She hadn't built the Resolve and its 4 escort ships to be laughed at. She'd built them because the first time humanity picked up a Concord transmission, back when she was 23, she had understood immediately that the galaxy was full of people, and people needed help sometimes, and nobody was coming to help her father. So she had decided she would be the one who came for someone else. That was the whole of it, really. Everything else, and the negotiations, the ship designs, the fleet command she'd clawed her way into, was just the shape that decision had taken. Ma'am? The comms officer, a young man named Priya. No, Elena corrected herself. Petrov. She needed to stop confusing her own crew. They'd trained together for 2 years, turned in his seat. Distress signal. Weak. Repeating. Mining colony. Designation KES 4. It's outside Concord jurisdiction. Outside jurisdiction how? Independent colony. Not affiliated with any member species, which means nobody official is required to answer it. Elena finished. Tassir's expression shifted, something careful entering it. Commander, I would advise against involvement. Non-aligned colonies are not the Concord's responsibility, and given your species' current diplomatic standing, an unsanctioned military response could be read as what? As us doing the thing we came out here to do? As overreach. You have no jurisdiction there either. Elena looked at the star chart. KES 4 was 4 hours away at their best speed. The signal was already 40 minutes old and getting weaker, which meant either the transmitter was failing or the situation on the ground was. She thought about her father again. The machines, the hallway, the years of learning that help which doesn't come in time is a very particular kind of cruelty. Worse, almost, than no help at all, because it proves help was possible and simply didn't arrive. Marcus, she said, set a course for KES 4. You heard the man, it's not our fight. It's not anyone's fight, that's the problem. She turned to face her old friend fully. They'd known each other since flight school, before either of them had ever seen a star that wasn't the sun. Marcus had voted for this program, fought for it beside her, and in the last year had started, quietly, to doubt it. She'd seen the doubt building in him for months. She understood it. She just didn't share it. If we wait for someone with the right paperwork, people die. I'm not doing that. Set the course. Marcus held her eyes for a second longer than necessary. Then he nodded and turned to his station. Course laid in, 4 hours. Tassier said nothing further, but he didn't leave the bridge either. Elena noticed that, filed it away. The 4 hours passed the way they always did before something bad, too slow, and then suddenly not slow enough. Elena spent part of it in the small officer's mess, eating food that tasted like nothing in particular, and part of it going over sensor logs of HFY that told her almost nothing. Independent mining colony, maybe 600 residents, minimal defenses, no history of conflict with anyone. No reason for anyone to be shooting at it, if that was even what was happening. You think it's pirates, Marcus said, sliding into the seat across from her. It wasn't a question. I think it's usually pirates. And if it's not, then we'll find out. She pushed her tray away, only half-eaten. Marcus, I need you with me on this. Not just following orders. With me. He was quiet for a moment. I am with you, Elena. I just don't know if being with you and being right are the same thing anymore. This isn't home. Out here, being good doesn't automatically mean people respect you for it. Sometimes it just means you're an easy target. Then will be a hard one, she said, and stood up before he could answer. The Resolve dropped out of faster-than-light 300,000 kilometers from HFY, and for 1 full second, nobody on the bridge said anything at all. The colony's main dome was burning, not on fire in the dramatic sense, no atmosphere to feed a real blaze, but venting a long silver plume of escaping air and debris into space, like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. Around it, 4 ships hung in a loose formation, firing on what remained of the colony's tiny defense platforms. IDs, Elena snapped. Petrov's hands moved fast over his console. Running them now. Commander, they're not matching anything. Not pirate configurations, not any registered Concord military hull. The weapon signatures are Concord grade, high grade, but the ships themselves. He looked up and his face had gone pale. I don't recognize the hull design at all. Nobody's ever logged it. Tassier had gone very still beside the tactical station, staring at the screen with an expression Elena had not seen on him before. Not condescension, not caution. Fear. That's impossible, he said almost to himself. What is? He didn't answer. On the main screen, one of the strange ships broke off from the others and began to turn, its weapon systems, whatever they were, rotating with slow and terrible precision toward the Resolve. Commander, Petrov said, voice tight. They're locking onto us. Elena's hand closed around the edge of her console. Behind her, she heard Marcus draw a breath. Shields up, she said. All hands, brace for... The first shot came before she finished the sentence, and it did not miss. The shot hit the forward shield and threw Elena sideways into her console hard enough to crack a rib, though she wouldn't know that until later. Alarms filled the bridge with a sound like screaming metal. Sparks rained down from an overhead panel. Shields at 60%, Petrov shouted. Return fire, all batteries. Elena hauled herself upright, tasting blood where she'd bitten her cheek. Marcus, evasive pattern now. The Resolve banked hard, and on the screen Elena watched her 4 escort ships scatter into the debris field around the colony's ruined dome. Not fleeing, she realized with something like pride even through the fear, but using the wreckage as cover, the way she'd drilled them to 1,000 times in simulations nobody thought they'd ever need in a real fight this soon. They're not expecting that, Marcus said, disbelief in his voice as he watched one of the strange ships hesitate, its firing solution disrupted by a human ship ducking behind a chunk of drifting hull plating. They're used to fighting in open space. Concord doctrine, straight lines and clean shots. Then let's not give them clean shots. Elena's mind was already 3 moves ahead, the way it always went once the fear settled into something usable. Petrov, Get me a channel to the evac shuttles on the surface. There's still people down there? There's always still people down there. Get me the channel. It took 40 seconds that felt like 40 years. Then a voice, panicked and young, broke through the static. A colony administrator screaming coordinates for a group of survivors trying to reach a battered supply shuttle at the dome's edge, directly in the path of the enemy formation. Marcus, I need a corridor, Elena said. Punch through, draw their fire, give that shuttle a window to run. That's us against 3 of their ships, Elena, and we're already down 40% shields. I know what it is. Do it. He did it. That was the thing about Marcus that Elena would never stop being grateful for, whatever doubts sat behind his eyes. When it mattered, he moved. The Resolve screamed forward, weapons blazing, drawing 2 of the enemy ships off their line toward the shuttle. It worked. The shuttle broke free, engines flaring, survivors visible for one frozen second through a viewport, before it vanished into the dark toward the rest of the fleet. It also meant the Resolve took the next 3 hits meant for that shuttle instead. The ship bucked hard enough that Elena was thrown from her feet entirely. When she pulled herself back up, half the bridge lighting was gone, replaced by the red pulse of emergency systems, and Petrov was shouting something about hull breaches on Deck 6. Deck 6. Where Marcus had gone 20 seconds ago to personally reroute power to the aft shields, because the system had locked up and someone had to do it by hand. Marcus. Elena was moving before she'd decided to move, out of her chair, toward the lift, ignoring Tassir calling her name, and the tactical officer shouting that she couldn't leave the bridge mid-engagement. She knew she couldn't. She went anyway. She found him in the smoke-filled corridor outside the power relay room, pinned under a fallen support strut, blood running from a gash above his eye, one leg bent at an angle that made her stomach turn. He was conscious, barely. "You're supposed to be commanding a battle," he managed. "Shut up." She got her shoulder under the strut and heaved, every ounce of strength she had screaming with the effort, until it shifted enough for 2 crew members who'd followed her to drag him free. Above them, through the hull, she felt rather than heard another impact, the ship groaning under a hit that, had she stayed on the bridge managing the fight instead of running to save one man, might have been avoided. Might have been answered with a maneuver that saved the ship 10% more shield capacity. She would never know. That was the trade she'd made. Standing in a smoke-filled corridor with her oldest friend's blood on her hands, and she would make it again. The enemy ships, strangely, did not press the advantage. By the time Elena got back to the bridge, breathing hard, Marcus stable and medical, the 3 unmarked ships were already turning away, breaking off the engagement entirely and retreating into FTL without so much as a parting shot, as if they'd gotten whatever they came for, or decided the cost of finishing the fight wasn't worth it. "Belay all pursuit," Elena said, hoarse. "Let them go. Status on survivors?" 61 recovered, Petrov said quietly. Colony had roughly 600 registered residents. Nobody said anything for a moment. 61 out of 600 was not a victory. It didn't feel like one anyway. It felt like the worst kind of arithmetic. They brought the survivors aboard in waves, burned, shaking, silent in the particular way people go silent when the scale of what happened hasn't caught up with their bodies yet. Elena walked among them personally, because she believed a commander who couldn't look at the cost of a decision had no business making it, and because it was the only way she knew to say, "I see you" to people who had just lost everything. That was where she found the girl. She was small, maybe 8 or 9 by human reckoning, though Elena couldn't be sure of the species' aging. Pale, gray-blue skin, large, dark eyes, a colony jumpsuit 3 sizes too big for her, clearly borrowed from an adult who hadn't made it. She wasn't crying. She was simply staring at nothing, arms wrapped around her knees, alone in a corner of the crowded shuttle bay while medical staff moved past her toward louder emergencies. Elena crouched down in front of her. "Hey," she said softly, though she knew the girl likely couldn't understand a word of standard. "You're safe now, I promise." The girl looked at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached out and closed one small hand around 2 of Elena's fingers, and did not let go. Elena stayed crouched there for a long time. It was Tasser who found her afterward in the observation deck, watching the wreckage of Kes 4 shrink slowly behind them as the fleet limped away at sublight. "Her name is Nyla," he said. "I got it from one of the colony administrators. She's an orphan. Both parents were in the dome when it—" He didn't finish. "Thank you," Elena said, "for finding out." He was quiet for a while, studying her rather than the wreckage. "You left your bridge mid-engagement to save one man. On my world, that would be considered a serious tactical failure, possibly a court-martial offense. I've heard that argument before. I am not making the argument. I am telling you I watched your enemy stop firing directly afterward, and I do not think it was chance." Tassir's voice had gone strange, careful. "I think they were testing something, and I think what they saw confused them enough to withdraw." Elena turned to look at him properly. "Testing what?" "I don't know yet." He hesitated, and something crossed his face that looked almost like fear again. "But I retrieved a partial data core from the wreckage of one of their ships before we left orbit. Most of it is corrupted. There is one phrase in it that repeats over and over in a language my translation systems don't recognize at all, which should not be possible. Every language in conquered space has been cataloged for centuries. Show me. I need more time. My equipment isn't suited for this. I have to use restricted archive systems, and I am not." He stopped himself. "I am not supposed to have access to them anymore." "Tassir." He met her eyes, and for the first time since she'd met him, there was no careful diplomatic distance in his expression at all, only something that looked uncomfortably close to dread. "Give me one day," he said. "I need to know if what I think this phrase means is actually possible. Because if it is, Commander Reyes, then everything the Conquered has told your species about this galaxy for the last 5 years has been a lie of omission, and I do not know yet how large a lie." Below them on the deck, Nyla still hadn't let go of Elena's hand. Tassir came to Elena's quarters at 0300 ship time, which told her, before he said a single word, that whatever he'd found, he hadn't been able to sleep on it either. "I could lose everything for showing you this," he said, stepping inside before she'd fully opened the door. "My position, my citizenship rank, possibly my freedom, depending on who finds out. I need you to understand that before I go further. Then why are you here?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Because I watched you carry a wounded child in your arms 4 hours ago, when you should have been sleeping, and I have worked for the Conquered for 30 years. And I have never once seen anyone with actual power do that without a camera nearby." He set a small data tablet on her table. "The phrase from the wreckage. I found a match. It took me most of the night because it isn't in any current archive. It's in a sealed one." Elena sat down slowly. "Sealed how?" 206 years ago, there was a species in conquered space called the Ithran. Peaceful. Technologically capable, but they refused, categorically refused, to develop weapons beyond basic self-defense. It made them unusual. It also made them, according to the official record, extinct. A plague, the histories say. Swept through their home system in less than a decade. Tragic, but not unusual for that era of galactic history. His mouth tightened. The phrase from the wreckage is a word in the Ithran language. It means, roughly, remember us. The room was very quiet. "You're telling me the ships that attacked that colony were flown by a dead species. I am telling you, the ships were flown by someone using a language that officially does not exist anymore, spoken by a people who officially do not exist anymore, and I do not believe in that many coincidences." Tassir sat down across from her, and for the first time she saw how tired he actually was. Not just from one sleepless night, but from something older. "I want to bring this to the council in the morning." "Do it." "I will. But Commander, I need you to prepare for them to do nothing. The Conquered does not investigate its own history quickly, especially not history that ends this cleanly." He was right. Elena watched it happen the next day exactly as he'd predicted. The council listened to Tassir's findings with polite, distant attention, thanked him for his diligence, and closed the session by classifying the entire matter as under advisement. A phrase Elena was coming to understand meant we would like this to disappear. Chorus, the delegate who had laughed at humanity's fleet 6 days earlier, did not laugh this time. He simply looked for one unguarded second, afraid. And then the expression was gone, replaced by practiced calm, and Elena filed that away too. "They know something," she said to Tassir afterward, in the corridor outside the council chamber. "They know of something," he corrected. "I don't believe they know what it is any more than we do. Fear and knowledge are not the same thing, but fear like that doesn't come from nowhere." She found some peace in the days that followed in the least likely place. A small, unused cargo bay she'd had converted into quarters for Nyla, since the girl refused to stay anywhere out of sight of Elena for more than a few minutes at a time. Elena understood that kind of fear better than she let on. She sat on the floor most evenings, running through a children's language program on a tablet, pointing at objects, saying their names slowly, waiting for Nyla to repeat them. "Ship," Elena said, pointing upward. "Shh. P," Nyla repeated, careful, testing the shape of the word. "Good. Really good." Elena smiled, and Nyla, for the first time since HFY, almost smiled back. Then Nyla did something unexpected. She reached for the tablet, turned off the language program, and began to hum instead. A slow, simple melody, 4 notes repeating, rising and falling like something meant to be sung by more than one voice. When she finished, she looked up at Elena expectantly, waiting. "That's beautiful," Elena said softly. "What is it?" Nyla didn't have the words yet to explain, but she hummed it again and pointed at herself and then made a small circling gesture with her hand that seemed to mean everyone, all of us, home. A song her people sang together. A song from a colony that no longer existed. Elena hummed it back to her badly, and Nyla laughed. A real laugh, small and surprised, like it had escaped before she meant to let it. It was the first time Elena had heard her laugh at all. Elena decided, privately, that she would learn to sing that melody correctly if it took her the rest of the year. Marcus found her there an hour later, walking with a cane, his legs still healing, his face pale but his eyes clear. "They're saying you've gone soft, you know," he said, easing himself down into a chair near the doorway. "Some of the crew. Not to your face. But I hear things. Let them say it." "I'm not disagreeing with you, Elena." He rubbed his jaw. "I spent the last week thinking you'd get us all killed being the person who runs toward the fire instead of away from it. And then I watched a scared kid learn to laugh again because you sat on a cargo bay floor every night this week instead of sleeping. I don't know what to do with that except admit I was wrong to doubt it." He paused. "Doesn't mean I'm not still scared. I think that's allowed too." "It's allowed," Elena said. "I'm scared most days, Marcus. I just don't let it decide anything for me." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, until Petrov's voice crackled urgently through the corridor comm. "Commander, priority alert. Concord Relay just picked up a distress call. Colony designation Pharaoh's Reach, independent registry. Same pattern as HFY. It's happening again, right now." Elena was on her feet instantly. "How far?" 6 hours at best speed. "Commander, the Concord Fleet Council has explicitly ordered us to stand down and let a certified response team handle it. They're citing jurisdiction and the diplomatic incident from last week." "Set the course," Elena said. "Marcus, are you fit to fly?" He was already pulling himself upright, wincing. "Try and stop me." They arrived 4 hours behind the attack this time, not ahead of it. The Concord's delays had cost them that, and found Pharaoh's Reach already burning, its colony dome a skeleton of twisted metal, the attackers long gone. There was no fight to win here, only wreckage and the terrible familiar work of searching for survivors among the dead. It was in that wreckage that they found him. A single enemy combatant, thrown clear of his own destroyed fighter, alive but badly injured, half buried under debris near what had once been the colony's central plaza. Human medics reached him before Concord protocol would have allowed anyone to, and against every rule of engagement Elena had ever been trained on, she ordered them to save him rather than leave him. He did not survive long. Internal injuries, the medic said quietly, nothing that could be done in the field. But in the last minutes of his life, strapped to a stretcher aboard the Resolve, his strange gray eyes found Elena's face, and he spoke 3 words, badly formed, clearly struggling with a language that wasn't his own, but unmistakably deliberate. Tassir, standing beside her, went white as he translated. "We are not the enemy," the dying man said. And then, with the last of his strength, one more fragment. "They are what's left." He died before he could say anything more. Elena stood in the medical bay for a long time afterward, staring at nothing, turning those words over. "We are not the enemy. We are what's left." Left of what? Left of whom? "Commander?" Petrov's voice, shaking, came over the comm. "Long-range sensors just picked up something big. Inbound from the outer edge of the system, no transponder, no registry match of any kind. Commander, the fleet is—" He stopped, and when he spoke again, his voice had dropped to something close to a whisper. "It's not 1 ship, it's not 10 ships. Our systems are counting hundreds, and it's still counting." Elena walked back onto the bridge in time to see the tactical display fill, slowly, with red. 412 ships. That was the final count. Once the sensors finished sorting the mass of contacts at the edge of the system into something the human systems could actually process, and the number sat on the tactical display like a verdict. "That's not a raiding force," Marcus said quietly. "That's an invasion." The Concord Council convened within the hour, the fastest Elena had seen them move on anything since her fleet arrived in this system. And for the first time since the laughter, 6 delegates had directed at her in that first meeting. Nobody on the screen looked amused. Chorus looked, if anything, like a man watching a debt finally come due. "Commander Reyes," he said, and his voice had lost every trace of its earlier condescension. "The Council is authorizing formation of a joint task force to respond to the incoming fleet. Given your unit's unusual operational record in this crisis, and given that no other captain present is willing to accept the assignment, command of that task force is being offered to you." "You want me to lead it?" Elena said slowly. "Because nobody else will." "I want you to lead it," Chorus said, "because you are apparently the only commander in this system who runs toward a burning colony instead of waiting for someone else to. I did not say that kindly 6 days ago. I am saying it now because it may be the only quality that keeps any of us alive." He paused. "The Council does not enjoy admitting that. I would ask you not to make us regret it." Elena accepted. There wasn't really a decision to make. It was Tassir who came to her that night with the rest of it, the piece he'd been chasing since the sealed archive first gave up its fragment of a dead language, the piece that made all 412 ships make a terrible kind of sense. "I found the full sealed file," he said, and his hands, Elena noticed, were not steady. "Commander, the Ithran did not die of a plague. I don't know how to say this except plainly. 206 years ago, the Concord Council determined the Ithran's refusal to militarize made them a strategic liability during a border conflict with a hostile power outside Concord space. Rather than risk the Ithran's territory falling to that enemy undefended, the Council authorized what the files call containment." His jaw tightened. It was not containment. It was extermination, a weapon deployed against their home system. Disguised afterward in the historical record as a natural plague, the Concord killed an entire peaceful species rather than let their territory become a liability, and then buried the truth so completely that even most of the current Council doesn't know it happened. Elena felt something cold settle in her chest. "And the ships coming toward us right now are the ones who survived, hidden, scattered, for 2 centuries, rebuilding in secret in whatever corner of space the Concord never thought to look. The raiders who hit Kess 4 and Pharaoh's Reach, I believe now they were scouts, testing colony defenses, testing response times, learning who would fight and who would run before the main fleet arrived to finish what they came here to do." He met her eyes. "They are not coming for the independent colonies, Commander. Those were never the target. They are coming for the Concord itself, and your fleet, having allied itself publicly with the Council this week, is standing exactly where they will expect to find it. Elena sat down slowly. 200 years of grief, arriving all at once. Something like that, yes. There wasn't time to feel the full weight of it, because the ship's alarms chose that exact hour to sound for an entirely different, smaller, and somehow more terrifying reason. An evacuation drill on decks 4 through 9 had gone wrong. A hull door malfunction trapping several crew in a maintenance corridor, and in the chaos of headcounts and lockdowns that followed, someone noticed that Nyla was not where she was supposed to be. Elena heard about it over comm, while she was still in the officer's briefing room with Tassir, still absorbing what he'd told her, and every other thought in her head simply stopped. Where was she last seen? She said, already moving. Cargo bay, ma'am, but the drill sealed half the corridors between there and medical. She could be anywhere on 3 decks. Seal nothing else, I'm going down there. Commander, we have 400 hostile ships inbound, and you are the task force commander. You cannot... I am aware of what I am, Elena said, and her voice did not rise, but something in it made the officer on the other end of the comm go quiet. Keep me updated on fleet movements. I will be reachable the entire time. Rhea's out. She found Nyla 20 minutes later, in a service corridor near the cargo bay, curled into a maintenance alcove with her hands over her ears, shaking, surrounded by the flashing red lights and blaring alarms of the drill that had clearly overwhelmed every sense she had left after the last 2 colonies she'd watched burn. She wasn't lost. She was hiding, the way a child hides from a world that has already proven it can take everything from her without warning. Elena didn't say anything at first. She just sat down on the floor of the alcove in the flashing red light and waited until Nyla's shaking hands slowly reached for her sleeve and held on. I'm sorry, Elena said quietly, once the girl had calmed enough to hear her. I'm sorry the world keeps being loud and scary. I promise I am not going anywhere, not while there's still a fight left to keep you safe. She didn't know if Nyla understood the words. She understood, Elena was fairly certain, everything underneath them. Marcus found them there. He'd come down himself, despite the cane, despite the leg that still wasn't fully healed, moving as fast as he could through corridors still cycling through drill lockdowns. You left the bridge again, he said. But there was no accusation in it this time, only something quieter. I know. I used to think that was your weakness, Elena. I've spent 6 days watching it be the only reason any of us are still breathing. He crouched down carefully, wincing, and offered Nyla a small, awkward wave, which she returned with the ghost of a smile. Fleet's assembling at the edge of the system. Command's asking where you are. I told them you were handling something more important and that they'd have to wait. Elena looked at him surprised. You said that? I've spent a week doubting you. I'm done doing that. He helped her to her feet, careful of Nyla still clinging to her hand. Come on, Commander. Let's go fly this thing before your absence starts a second panic. The task force assembled at the edge of the system 2 hours later. Human ships at the center, a scattering of Allied Concord vessels around them. None of it enough, Elena knew, to meet 412 ships in open battle and survive it. The incoming fleet was close enough now that visual contact would come within the hour. Then, without warning, a channel opened. Not requested, not negotiated, simply forced through every ship in the task force simultaneously, the way only a fleet with vastly superior technology could manage. A single voice spoke, translated a half-second late by systems struggling to process a language most of them had never catalogued, cold and precise, and carrying 2 centuries of something Elena could only describe as grief that had curdled into resolve. To the new species standing where our people once stood, the voice said, we do not know you. We have no grievance with you, and we take no pleasure in what is about to happen to you regardless. You have 1 hour to move your fleet clear of conquered space, or you will be destroyed alongside them. The channel closed. On the tactical display, 412 ships continued their advance, unhurried, patient, absolutely certain. Elena stood on her bridge, Nyla's small hand still gripped in hers where she had refused to let go, and understood with total clarity that in less than an hour, she would have to decide whether humanity's first real stand among the stars would be spent defending a conquered that had committed genocide, or abandoning everyone else in this system to save only themselves. Neither option felt like something she could live with. 51 minutes remained on the clock when Captain Reyes gathered every ship commander in her task force onto a single emergency channel, and the first thing she heard before she'd said a single word was Captain Okafor of the Meridian asking the question everyone was thinking. "Why are we still here, Commander? We could pull our ships clear right now. Save every human life in this task force." The ultimatum wasn't aimed at us specifically, it was aimed at the conquered. "Because if we run," Elena said, "we save ourselves and let a species that was nearly exterminated finish the job on everyone else who happened to be standing nearby, including thousands of colonists who had nothing to do with what the conquered did 200 years ago. That's not a victory, Captain, that's just a slower kind of guilt. With respect, Commander, humanity is 140 years old. We didn't do this. Why is it our fight to bleed for?" It was a fair question. Elena had been asking herself some version of it for the last 40 minutes and hadn't landed anywhere close to a clean answer, until Tassir's voice cut into the channel, quiet but certain. "Because I have new information," he said, "and I believe it changes what fight this actually is." He'd spent the last hour buried in the sealed archive, chasing one final thread, why HFY, specifically, out of every independent colony in the region, had been the first target. It hadn't made sense to him. Random colonies didn't explain the precision of the attack pattern, so he'd looked deeper, past the public registry, into records the Concord had never intended anyone to cross-reference. HFY was not a random target, he said. Beneath its mining operation, the Concord maintained a hidden research site, a black site established shortly after the Ithran extermination, used to study the very technology it destroyed them for refusing to weaponize. The returning fleet did not attack a random colony. They attacked the place where the Conquered buried the evidence of what it did to their people. Pharaoh's Reach held a secondary archive of the same project. These were not acts of random terror, Commander. They were a species erasing the proof of its own murder, one location at a time before any one official could find it. Elena felt something shift into place, cold and clear. That's why they spared civilians at HFY when they had every ship and every advantage to kill everyone in that dome. They weren't there for the people. No, Tassir said. I do not believe they were. There was a silence on the channel. Then Elena said the thing she'd been holding since Tassir first told her about the Ithran, the thing that had been sitting in the back of her mind for days without a shape she could name. Nyla, she said quietly. Commander, run a genetic comparison, Ithran physiology against Nyla's medical scan from intake. Do it now. It took 4 minutes. 4 minutes that felt considerably longer, standing on the bridge with Nyla asleep in a chair nearby, exhausted from a day that had asked far too much of an 8-year-old, utterly unaware that the answer to a 200-year-old mystery was curled up under a borrowed blanket 6 feet away from the woman trying to solve it. Match, the ship's medical officer said finally, voice unsteady. 94% genetic correlation to the archived Ithran baseline. Commander, she's not an isolated survivor. Her physiology is a near-perfect match. Wherever her colony really came from, it wasn't independent. It was Ithran. Hidden in plain sight for 200 years, disguised as an unaffiliated mining operation, probably because it was easier to hide a small population there than anywhere the Concord might think to look. Elena looked over at the sleeping girl, and every piece of the last week rearranged itself around a single, unbearable truth. HFY hadn't been attacked randomly. It had been attacked because it was Ithran territory, and its people, Nyla's people, had been living quietly under everyone's notice for 2 centuries, and the returning fleet had come to reclaim what was theirs, or bury what was left of it, or both. They're not looking for the colony, Elena said slowly. They're looking for survivors, for their own people. That's what this whole campaign has been, which means, Tassir said very quietly, that the girl in your care may be the single most important piece of proof of what actually happened to the Ithran that exists anywhere in this system. And in 40 minutes, a fleet capable of destroying everyone in it may either kill her without knowing what she is, or discover exactly what she is and take her from you by force. The bridge was silent. Elena felt Marcus's eyes on her from across the room and did not look at him, because she already knew what he was thinking, and she didn't need to hear it out loud to feel the shape of the choice closing in around her. "There's a third option," she said. "Commander? We tell them the truth, all of it. Broadcast it, not just to the incoming fleet, but across every Concord channel in this system, publicly, before the Council can bury it again. Every civilian relay, every Allied ship, everyone. Let the whole galaxy hear exactly what the Concord did 200 years ago, and exactly what it's still hiding underneath a mining colony's collapsed dome." She looked at Tassir. "Can you route it that widely?" "I can. It would end my career instantly, and likely the same for anyone who assists me. It would also almost certainly provoke the Council into trying to stop the transmission by force, which, given our current position—" He stopped and something settled over his face, a decision arriving. "I will do it anyway." "Elena," Marcus said quietly, finally breaking his silence. "If you do this, we're not just facing an angry fleet from outside anymore. We'll be turning our own allies against us too. I know. You're choosing to protect one child over the safety of this entire task force. I'm choosing not to let the same thing happen to her that happened to her whole species," Elena said, and her voice didn't waver. "If that's not what we came out here to be, Marcus, then I don't know what any of this was for." He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded once and turned back to his station without another word of argument. The broadcast went out 6 minutes before the ultimatum's deadline, carried on every channel Tassir could reach. Elena's voice steady and clear as she laid out everything. The Ithran, the extermination disguised as plague, the black sites, the girl currently sleeping under a blanket in her ready room who was, as far as anyone could determine, one of the last living proofs that a peaceful species had been murdered for the crime of refusing to become a weapon. The reaction was immediate, and it did not come from the incoming fleet. It came from the Concord Council itself. "Unauthorized transmission detected," a cold voice cut across the fleet channel less than 90 seconds later. "Commander Reyes, you are ordered to cease transmission immediately and stand down. Failure to comply will be treated as an act of insurrection against Concord Command." "I'm not stopping," Elena said. "Then you leave the Council no choice." What happened next happened fast enough that Elena would only fully understand the sequence of it afterward, piecing it together from sensor logs. 3 Allied Concord vessels, ships that had, an hour earlier, been part of her own task force, broke formation and opened fire, not on the incoming Ithran fleet at the system's edge, but on the human ships beside them. The first shot came from an ally, not from the enemy the galaxy had told humanity to fear. "Shields up, all hands brace," Elena shouted, the resolve rocking under an impact from a friendly ship for the first time in the entire crisis, and in the chaos that followed. Human ships suddenly fighting on 2 fronts, a 400-ship fleet still advancing from the outer system, allies turned hostile firing from within. Elena understood with total, terrible clarity that the galaxy had just shown its true shape. The enemy had never really been the Ithran at all. The resolve shuddered under a second hit from the Vantage. One of her own allied ships turned hostile, and for a moment, Elena understood exactly what it felt like to be caught between 2 histories that had nothing to do with her at all. One 200 years old, one 140. Both of them suddenly demanding her blood as payment. "Return fire on the Vantage, minimum force only. Target their weapon systems, not their hull," Elena ordered, refusing even now to let this become simple slaughter in either direction. "Marcus, keep us between the civilian relay stations and anyone shooting. Petrov, I need that broadcast still running. Do not let them cut it." "Broadcast's still live, Commander. It's reached half the system now." The incoming fleet, 412 ships strong, continued its advance, and Elena watched the tactical display with the particular helplessness of a commander who has run out of moves and is simply waiting to find out what happens next. Then, without warning, The advance stopped. Every ship in the Ithran fleet went dark on weapons systems simultaneously, holding position at the edge of the system, and a single channel opened. Not the cold ultimatum of an hour before, but something quieter. More careful, Commander Reyes, the voice said, and this time it did not sound like an executioner. It sounded, Elena thought, like someone who had just heard something they had been waiting 200 years to hear, and did not quite know what to do with it. We received your transmission, all of it. I am Sorel, and I lead what remains of the Ithran people. I did not expect the truth of what happened to us to be spoken aloud by a species that has known us for 6 days. I didn't do it for you, Elena said honestly, breathing hard, one hand still braced against her console as the Resolve rocked under continuing fire from the Vantage. I did it for a little girl in my care who deserved better than to be a secret. A pause. The child. Kes 4's true population. We came searching for survivors and found only wreckage and a rescue log listing 61 names taken aboard a human vessel. We assumed. Sorel's voice caught, just slightly, the first crack in 2 centuries of careful control. We assumed the worst. We came here prepared to make the Concord pay for finishing what it started. We did not expect to find that a stranger had already saved the last of what we came looking for. She's safe, Elena said. She's asleep 2 decks below me right now, and she is going to stay safe, whatever happens in the next 5 minutes. There was a long silence on the channel. Then, order a ceasefire on all Ithran vessels immediately, Sorel said, not to Elena, but to someone on their own side. We are not here to destroy the ones who told the truth about us. We are here to make sure it is never buried again. A pause, and then, directly to Elena, Commander, you did not have to say what you said. You had a task force to protect, and every reason to let our quarrel with the Concord remain someone else's problem. Why did you choose otherwise? Elena looked for just a second at the tactical display where the Vantage was still firing on her ships, at the chaos she had brought down on her own fleet by choosing truth over safety, and found that she still believed, completely, that it had been worth it. Because somebody has to be the one who shows up, she said, even when it costs them something, especially then. That's the only kind of help that actually means anything. The ceasefire from the Ithran fleet changed everything within minutes. Without 400 hostile ships bearing down on the system, the remaining Concord loyalist vessels, the ones who had turned on humanity at the Council's order, found themselves outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and very quickly out of any justification for continuing to fight. Tassir, working frantically from a secondary channel, broadcast Sorel's ceasefire order alongside Elena's original transmission to every Allied ship in the system, and one by one, the attacking vessels stood down, their crews clearly as unwilling as everyone else to keep fighting a war built on a lie that had just been exposed to the entire Concord. By the time the Vantage finally powered down its weapons, the sun had begun to rise over what remained of the nearby colony worlds, and Elena Reyes stood on a battered, scorched bridge, breathing hard, alive, and utterly uncertain what came next. What came next was 2 weeks of council sessions that made the original meeting where Chorus had laughed at humanity look like a friendly chat. The full truth came out in pieces. The extermination, the black sites, decades of quiet cover-up maintained by council members who had never personally ordered the Ithran's destruction, but had inherited the silence around it and chosen, generation after generation, to keep it. Some of them faced formal removal. Some faced worse. Elena found she took no particular satisfaction in any of it. Justice, when it finally arrived 2 centuries late, mostly just felt like grief with paperwork attached. She was offered a seat on the reformed Concord Council as part of what one delegate called, without apparent irony, acknowledgement of exceptional diplomatic service. Elena turned it down. I don't want a seat at your table, she told the assembled council, standing in the same chamber where she'd once been laughed at for asking for one. I want you to build a table that doesn't need a species to disappear before you notice they were sitting at it in the first place. Reform your registry protocols. Protect independent colonies properly, the way you should have protected the Ithran from the start. Do that and you'll have humanity's support. Don't, and you'll have our fleet showing up at your next HFY whether you've authorized it or not. Chorus, who had once found humanity's ambitions laughably premature, said nothing for a long moment. Then, slowly, he inclined his head, the closest thing to a formal bow Elena had seen from him. "The Council accepts the terms," he said, "and Commander, for what it is worth, the galaxy is not laughing anymore." Marcus found her afterward on the observation deck, his leg finally out of its brace, leaning on the railing beside her instead of a cane. "You could have taken the seat," he said. "Might have made all this easier next time." "Next time we'll do it the hard way too, if that's what it takes." She glanced at him. "You never answered me. Are you still scared?" "Every day." He smiled, small and real. "Doesn't mean I'm going anywhere, Elena. I watched you hold this fleet together with nothing but stubbornness and one very tired 8-year-old's hand in yours. If that's what commanding a fleet looks like, I'd rather be standing next to it than doubting it from a distance." Below them, on the lower observation platform, Nyla stood pressed against the viewport, watching the wreckage of the old battle finally being cleared away by salvage crews, watching new construction lights already beginning to flicker to life around what remained of HFY's rebuilt colony frame in the distance. Elena walked down to join her. "Hey," she said, crouching beside her the way she had 100 times now. "You okay?" Nyla looked up at her, and after a moment, in careful, deliberate standard, the words she'd been practicing every night for 2 weeks, she said, "Home." "New home?" Elena's throat tightened. "If you want it to be," she said. "I already talked to some people. If you want, Nyla, I'd like to be your family, officially. Not just someone who found you. Someone who stays." Nyla didn't answer with words this time. She simply reached up and hummed, quiet and clear, the same 4 notes she'd sung once in a cargo bay days after losing everything. And Elena, this time, knew every note by heart, and hummed it back to her, perfectly, until they were singing it together. Tassir joined them a while later, having formally resigned his Vekaran diplomatic post that morning, a decision his own government had called reckless, and Elena had called overdue. "I have been offered several postings," he told her, watching the salvage lights flicker over the horizon. "Comfortable ones, prestigious ones. I turned them all down. Why? Because I have spent 30 years serving an institution that found it easier to bury the truth than to face it," he said. "And I have spent the last 2 weeks watching a species that is 140 years old choose the truth anyway, at real cost, without being asked to, because a child needed someone to. I would like to see what that species builds next, if you'll have me." "We'll have you," Elena said. The 3 of them stood there a long while, watching the light change over the rebuilding colony below. No fanfare, no grand parade, no galaxy suddenly kneeling in awe of humanity's power, because that had never been the point, and Elena had known it from the very first laugh 6 weeks in a lifetime ago.